Hey guys, welcome back to Panic Button Podcast, where we talk about mental health and how we get through it and why we get through it, and just shoot the shit. We just talk. And today I'm a little tired, but hanging in there. Was a long week. It felt like, but we get through it. And the sun finally came out, which is a big plus. Definitely a mood booster. So getting that vitamin D in is great for you. Just being outside and enjoying what this weather has to offer, even though it hasn't offered very much lately. It's been super cold over here, but finally hitting 40 to 50 degrees. So hoping we get some spring. But yeah, looking at the week mental health wise to do my check-in with you all, it's been okay. What I've noticed is I've started to kind of really trying to hold myself accountable more. And we've talked about that before in our episodes. And I really want to hold myself more accountable to being present and looking at my success. Because I think a lot of the times I get down on myself if I have a bad day. We get upset and think that bad day is going to roll on and on and on, when in reality, it usually doesn't. So what I like to do recently is I will mark on a calendar when I have a panic attack. And for me, it's a visual aid to be able to track my progress, because I'll notice that I'll have a panic attack and then day after day after day after day, 5, 6, 7 days later, without an attack, which is amazing. Any progress like that is great. But it's good to see it because sometimes we don't always feel it. So I'm a visual learner, so I don't know if that helps for anybody. But I think it helps for me. But yeah, jumping into things, we have a special guest here today for our episode. Her name is Janice Johnson Dowd, and she is a retired social worker who specializes in working with teens and families and addiction. She's also a mother of 4 and a recovering alcoholic who has put her personal and professional experience together to actually write a book. And that book's being released in spring of 2025. So she's here today to talk about her own struggles with mental health. Janice, are you here with us?
I am. Thank you for having me. Yes, and I can really relate to the visual learning or the visual recognition of using a calendar. I'm a slave to my calendar in terms of keeping me organized, but I also use it in terms of journaling. And if I have a bad day, to mark that down and keep it in the past.
Yeah, it helps, right? It helps to see that progress when we don't always feel it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and I was going to say, being that I am an active member of AA and 12-step groups, we mark periods of sobriety with chips for like 1 month, 2 months. And I think that's it. I don't know. It's a sense of accomplishment when you go 30 days or 60 days or a whole year without drinking. So again, that's another visual way
It's
to look
awesome.
yeah.
Maybe I'm going to start to pass out something of my own for anxiety. What I would start to pass out? Maybe little boats, because I like to tell people that sometimes we fall into the panic pool. So maybe when you go a week or however long, week, 2 weeks, 1 month, I'm going to start to pass out little boats.
That's a great idea. I don't
But
know.
just jumping right into it, Janice, what would you say for our listeners here? What does your mental health journey look like? So we learn a little bit more about you.
Okay, so that is a great question. And until recently, I would have said my mental health journey, my struggles with mental health began with my addiction to alcohol. But really, looking back, I grew up in an alcoholic, dysfunctional family. It wasn't horrendous. It was just like my dad was a functioning alcoholic. There was always tension, a little stress. And if anything, there was always this double standard where inside the house it was a little crazy and chaotic, but outside the house we faked looking normal like every other, home on the street. So really my mental health journey began then because it was confusing for me as a kid and as a young adult. I mean, I was unhappy, but I couldn't really pinpoint where that unhappiness came from at that time, as at that age as a kid. After I went off to school, and started taking college classes, I was naturally attracted to social work, put all the pieces of the puzzle together, identified that I was at that point an adult child of an alcoholic and struggling with all those traits. And as a young woman and as a social worker early in their career, I practiced an adult child of alcoholic or codependency groups early on. And I was focused on my mental health at that time. But it didn't seem, and maybe because I was a social worker and everyone I knew was in therapy or doing some kind of like mental health stuff, that it normalized that so much for me back then. But so really, I've been working on my mental health issues my entire life from the time I left home. So that's kind of where I came from. But the first time, and stop me if I get too long-winded, the first time I would say that the issues really conflicted with my functioning was I had postpartum depression after my second child and my fourth child. And after my second child, here's the crazy part. I'm a social worker. I was depressed, but I was still too afraid to tell anyone how depressed I was or that I needed help or that I felt like something was wrong with me. And this is back in the 90s. I don't think postpartum depression got the same kind of attention as it does now. So I just struggled through that year when I had two small kids. And my answer to it at that time was, because I was a stay-at-home mom, my answer was to go back to work. And that it kind of helped regulate me. And I just kind of pushed through it. But during my fourth pregnancy, towards the end, I started having terrible insomnia. And by then, I'm very blessed. I've lived in the same community for like 30 years now. And I had the same doctor deliver all four of my babies. So by the time baby 3 and 4 came around, I could pretty much tell her anything, I could go into the office and be like, I'm not sleeping. And on my computer, there we go. Anyhow, so I had a really open and honest relationship with her at that time. I told her that I was really struggling with sleep and the blues towards the end of my pregnancy. So the minute I gave birth, she put me on an antidepressant. And that changed everything. I mean, it still took me a while to work through my depression and my blues with that fourth child. And don't get me wrong, I'm not blaming my kids. It had nothing to do with my kids. I think a lot of it has to do with the hormonal changes in your body, but also the fact that, I was hard-headed. I didn't know how to ask for help. I had a certain amount of pride about being a social worker. I'd done therapy before. I knew it was out there, but I would go, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. So I was in a lot of denial early on about my mental health and how it impacted, the people around me. So that's the old history of me. Have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you said that you had felt some type of like shame and denial because of your career choice. But do you think that a lot of people in this community face the same things? Then that's why we're so hard to ask for help. So do you see that that's like a trend almost, that it's hard to recognize when you need help and actually asking for help when suffering with a mental illness?
I absolutely do. And that's one of the things I hear you saying in your podcast is that you want people to know that they aren't alone, that it's normal. I mean, it's normal to need help. It's okay to ask for help, and it's not a sign of weakness. I've heard you say that maybe in different words, but I think that's so important. And again, I maybe it's changed with the times because this was my last child was born in 1999. So really mental health is catching up. But I had a hard time asking for help, you know. So
Yeah, yeah, and I think, like you said, to an extent, we all kind of do one way or the other. And yeah, I do mention. It's funny that you say that. My therapist hates when I always say that I feel weak, and that anxiety makes me feel like a weakness. And she's like, there's nothing weak about it. You know, asking for help and needing help and giving yourself grace. That's the strongest thing you can do. So I
absolutely.
think we really need to push the envelope on that to help people that are suffering right now realize that that's the first step, right? It's not just a joke that we say, like, denial isn't just a river in Egypt.
Mhm.
Like, we
Yeah.
need to be very self-aware. We need to be willing to ask for help.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's always my biggest thing as well, is, just making sure that people know that it's available. And no
Hmm.
matter what that looks like, it might not look like therapy to other people, but it is available. And however that looks, I really advise people to find that help, because that's how we get through this. That's one of the key home hitters of how we figure it out.
Hmm. Absolutely. I think that's true too. And we all, self-soothe and heal ourselves in different ways. So what works for me may not work for you. Like I know in my 20s and 30s, I was a high school and college athlete. So into my 20s, I continued to use running, road races, things like that is really one of my mental health fixes, getting those endorphins in naturally. So I
I
think
hate working out. Don't tell me that's the only way.
well, that's a it's not the only way, but um it worked for me. And again, it didn't work for a lot of people, and it doesn't work for everything. Everyone has different things that they like. I mean, for some people it might be fishing, or it might be very serious meditation and yoga. For me back then it was running and exercise. And that was part of my problem when I finally hit like my 40s. I had 4 kids that were
And you
and it
finally realized that running sucked? Or you're like, no, I still like this?
no, I still like it, but my body's beginning to give out. Um, no, but with 4 kids, you, none of them were old enough to babysit the other. I was married at the time, and my now ex-husband, he was gone. His job demanded him to travel, and he was gone 3 nights a week. So I couldn't go running unless I got a babysitter and all of that. And that's just hassle. I mean, it's just one of those little things, good things I used to do for myself that I let go of, which I think a lot of people do that. Like, we don't consciously decide to stop taking care of ourselves. It kind of eases up on you. Do you think that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because that makes me think of the other night when I was speaking with my partner about how I like taking baths.
Mm-hmm.
And something as simple as taking a bath, I have to like schedule that into my calendar. And it's either like, don't get to go to bed at 9, because I'm like a little old lady over here. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't get to go to bed at 9, or I take a bath. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like sleep or relax, but then sleeping is relaxing. So it's always like you're making something is going to suffer, right? Something is going to be sacrificed in order to put yourself ahead, honestly,
Right.
like to take care of yourself. So it's sad that that's kind of like the reality sometimes of how busy our lives are, is it feels like things that make us good, like running or taking a bath or something like that, we have to like force ourselves to make time for it. because it doesn't just come naturally. And I wish it did, because that would be so beneficial.
Well, and I don't know if you're like me. I mean, because I know you have one child, correct?
I do.
So it's really easy to put that child's needs in front of your own. I mean, for me,
Absolutely.
Yeah, like if they need something, okay.
Well, you have what, 4 or 5?
I have 4. They're all adults now.
So you're outnumbered, Mom.
I know. Well, that definitely was. I think that's part of why I had the postpartum depression after my second child, because my husband then was traveling at least 3 nights a week, if not 4 nights a week. And it was me. We had recently moved. All of my neighbors, all of the house. I was trying to be a stay-at-home mom, which is not in my nature. But all of the women neighbors all worked, and I was home alone in a new city and all of that. I'm sorry, I just got off on a tangent, but it goes back to that, like, children change everything. And it's okay to still make time for yourself. You know, you might have to, like you said, you might have to schedule it in. So
yeah, but it's important, and we gotta do it.
Yeah.
And we talk about kids, like, it's interesting, and I'm curious your take on it. And a lot of people don't talk about this, I think, but since you are also a parent as well as myself, how do you navigate that, having a mental illness while being a parent?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. And early on, okay, because I'm a full-blown alcoholic, I started drinking in my 40s, and I circled the toilet for a couple of years, making my family, my kids mostly miserable, because I did most of my drinking at home. And then when I got into recovery, I was very self-centered and selfish, and still wasn't really a good parent to my kids. At that point, I totally lost your question. So navigating being a parent, what was your question?
Yeah, so you're going to make me think about it again, too.
Yeah.
I guess the best way of putting it is, like, we don't talk about how it is to be a parent with a mental illness.
Yes.
And how to navigate that. So I want to hear kind of your look on it.
Okay, so that's great. So yeah, thanks for pulling me back onto the highway. So
bring it back in. Come on, we got this.
We can do it. All right, so I went way off the highway for a while. So because the end of my active addiction, I was an emotional and spiritual train wreck. I was still kidding myself thinking that I was a good parent, but I wasn't. And my kids could verify that and probably be happy to contribute to this conversation. And early recovery, because my treatment center was about 200 miles from home, and because I carried this huge guilt and shame about becoming an alcoholic as a social worker and a mother. Like, I grew up in an alcoholic home. I swore I would never become an alcoholic, and I did. And to get back to the answer, so for a good 2 years of active addiction, I was a lousy parent. For the first 2 years of early recovery, I was just as lousy of a parent. When I finally got to the other side and put it in perspective, here's the main point. I came to realize that by my demonstrating to my kids that I can recover and cope with and deal with my mental illness, I'm giving them an example of overcoming an issue. Like, I'm a role model. I mean, I get this from my therapist. Whenever, the guilt starts stirring up, she'll bring me back and she'll be like, no. You're teaching your kids how to take care of themselves. You're making self-care, going to therapy, asking for help, normal, natural. So I messed it up for a good 4 years.
Yeah, 100%.
Now I'm almost 11 years sober. My kids I'm not being arrogant when I say this, they're really proud of me. And they're proud of the book I've written and the podcast that I'm doing. And
they have a lot to be proud of. That's incredible.
Yeah. So navigating and again, if any of my children developed an addiction or a serious mental illness, I think that they would be able to reach out for help much quicker than like I did. So yeah, it was tough. I made a lot of mistakes, which is essential. I don't want to jump ahead and start talking about my book, but that's what my book is about. My book is about helping parents.
We'll get there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, it's about learning how to be a parent with a mental illness, and that it doesn't have to be a handicap. It can be just another way of parenting. There's good sides of it too. I think, my kids are probably much kinder, and of course, every mother thinks their kids are perfect. But I do think they're probably less judgmental, much kinder to people who have any type of disability, whether it's a mental illness or a physical disability or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
And we need more of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the things.
Absolutely, we need that.
As a parent with my kids, one of the things in terms of parenting with a mental illness is that I'm just brutally honest. I don't want them. I'm one of those people who make assumptions. Like you get one of those texts and you're not sure what it means. Like like say you get a text from your boss that says, make sure you're at work at 8:00 tomorrow. In my head, I might turn that into like, oh my God, she's reminding me that I've been late for the last 5 Fridays. Whereas it might really be just a sincere, hey, I wanted to remind you that I rescheduled you and you're supposed to come in at 8 instead of 7.
I'm glad you take it that way, because my anxiety, panic-ridden brain would be like, why am I getting fired?
Exactly.
Make sure you're here at 8:30 a.m. Be like, do you need me to bring a box for my stuff?
Yeah. And that happened to me yesterday. My boss came up to me in the back and she goes, I got to talk to you about something. And immediately my head went to, oh, what did I do? But it was nothing even a relationship. It was just like news from the corporate headquarters that had nothing to do with me. I was like, oh, okay. But my brain does go to, what have I done? So that I think is a factor of growing up in my dysfunctional family with my parents who were, people who the cup is half empty as opposed to half full. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting that a lot of people that I've spoken with, they have said that their childhood within their childhood home, have experienced these mental illnesses firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, do you think that there obviously is a correlation to experiencing these things at such a young age to it almost being inevitable to experience these things as an adult, and that we kind of fall into, like these, you were at home in like a dysfunctional home, however you want to say it, like how much did that actually affect you?
Well, I do think it affected me a lot. And I think that, those patterns that we pick up and develop as young children stay with us. Like it's still my nature. I kind of play it off as a joke. It's still my nature to see the cup as half empty. I do my best to catch myself in it, but I don't always. So, but yes. And in terms of the family thing, I mean, psychoanalytically, of course, we repeat what we grew up with. We think, one of the things I've learned in my therapy, because I still go to therapy, excuse me, after all these years, I still enjoy going to group therapy and getting feedback from other people. But I lost my train of thought again. What can I say? This is my age or something. So
I'm throwing a lot at you. It's late and we're doing it.
That's all right. We're going to push through it. So we had a great time talking the other day. We're going to do it again. But yeah, no. Oh, I think we repeat the patterns. We repeat the patterns that we grew up with. And sometimes you don't know what you
Sure.
don't know. So it wasn't until, several years into sobriety and me getting into this group that I learned that some of the things that I thought was normal growing up probably isn't considered normal now. Here's a really subtle one. Both of my parents are children of immigrants. Their fathers came from very patriarchal societies. I like to say it kind of borders on misogyny. And there was always the underlying mission statement that girls aren't as important as boys. So my parents both grew up on farms. Their parents pushed the boys into education. The girls were supposed to become housewives, and some of that still, so that subtle statement, my mom did her best to fight that. She was like, you're going to college. I don't care what you study, but you're going to college. And, but still there was that underlying girls are not as important as. There was never as much pressure put on me as my brothers, things like that. So that's just an example of how a message that gets passed down from one generation to the next. And I inadvertently passed that down to my daughter and didn't begin to really see some of those things until I started doing the therapy work of it, looking at my dysfunctional family and how it impacted my parenting to kind of pull it together. But now on the other side, I really believe there's a genetic predisposition to alcoholism and a lot of mental illnesses. I'm the best at explaining, the genetics of or the science of addiction, but I do think there's a real correlation to it. What do you think?
Yeah, the more people that I've talked to that have dealt with these things, I think that they are on kind of like the same wavelength as you, where they agree that they think that they were kind of predisposed to these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that it started at home. And sometimes I think that that is 100% true. I think that as children, being in that environment and at home, and that's your place, and people
Mm-hmm.
think that, like, what am I trying to say? I'm losing my train of thought as well. I need a coffee or something. That your parents are your people. And if
Right.
these issues are starting at home, it's setting you up for like the rest of your life to kind of feel like it's going to be that way. So
That's
we have to
correct.
like break through that mold.
Right.
And I'm fortunate enough where I had an incredible childhood. Absolutely incredible. But there were things that have happened that I think that do weigh on me from a childhood experience level. Definitely my parents got divorced when I was 15 years old, and I have abandonment issues because you're young and you see two people that are in love and you feel like if they can't figure it out, who can?
Right.
So it kind of instills that fear factor in you, and I think that these things, we can definitely be predisposed to them. And at such a young age, again, that's our environment, that's what we learn, that's what we grow in. So if that's what you're surrounded by, I think that it's definitely I don't want to say it's inevitable because I don't think that it is. But there's some of us who had a terrible childhood and grow up to be incredible adults, very mentally clear, and they take those previous issues and they turn it into something different. But usually those kids are very hard on themselves, I've realized. Those adults too. They had a very tough upbringing. But for the most part, I would say I do believe that. I do think that a lot of these issues with some of us adults have started at home at a young age.
And that pattern makes it a little tougher to break. Takes more practice.
Yeah,
New
yeah, absolutely.
Replacing the old bad habits with new habits. All of that good
Yeah, and
stuff.
like I kind of like how you had mentioned that being a parent dealing with a mental illness, is showing your kids almost that you're like a superhero. Because it is, and it shouldn't be looked down on. It shouldn't be flawed. Just because you suffer from a mental illness does not mean you're any less capable of taking care of a child. And I think that if anything, I want to almost make my son see the strength and see the drive that his parents have, because me and his other mom suffer from mental illnesses, anxiety and everything that comes with that. And I think we would both agree that we want him to know that it's okay. And this is a safe place to talk about it, whether you're feeling upset, anything like that. Mental health should be a regular conversation. It should be a normal topic. It shouldn't be, looked down upon. It shouldn't be anything like that. It should always have positives around it. And just that his parents were strong, because it's not easy. And I don't think we talk about that enough, of how it can be very challenging when you suffer from whatever mental illness it may be and you're trying to raise a child. Sometimes it's hard to find that balance. So I think a lot of these parents that do struggle, you're really just showing your strength, because it's sometimes hard to take care of yourself while putting 100% of your energy into taking care of a child, because that's what we are supposed to do, right? We're supposed to make these little humans and have them be the best person in society, just a well-polished little person. And that's not the easiest journey itself.
No, that's very true. Parenting is a really tough job. It's a hard job, and it really does take a village to raise a child, and two parents. But the thing that you said that I really liked was that you want to make it safe to talk about it, so that your child will understand. And I think my kids are like that too. Different kids more so than others. That they're not afraid to talk to me about what's going on with them. So
I think it's extremely important.
Yeah. I mean, communication, openness is the best key in addressing all of these issues, because it's the secrets. I mean, we talk about that a lot in AA. It's the secrets that kill you, things that you hide, and which you're probably not as good at hiding as you think you are. But it's the secrets that keep you sick. When you talk about it and share about it, it not only helps you, but it helps the other people too. So that's my little sermon.
I totally agree. Being a parent is tough, and we should help our children at a young age to realize it's a safe environment, and that mental health needs to be talked about, and it can be talked about at whatever forum, whatever level that looks like. And that's kind of the reasoning behind my podcast as well, is normalizing it. We need to normalize this conversation. We need to accept that these conversations need to happen, and they will happen, but it's just allowing people a platform to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. The more we talk about it, the less shame we feel about it, and the less judgment other people put on us, because most people judge what they don't know or don't understand, And
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sometimes we kind of feel like, who are we to be giving advice or talking about these things? And sometimes I find myself asking myself that very same question, but I'm living this, I'm speaking what I'm living. So if I'm not going to do it, who's going to do it?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I love how you started out with a check-in. I'm going to check in, and you tell people where you are, and you're brutally honest about that. That's very empowering. Great role
I appreciate that. I like to show people that we're going through it, and it's real, and it's ugly, and it's beautiful, and it's powerful, and it's everything that we think that it is, but we have the power to control what it is and what that looks like. So I like to make people feel like it's okay, because it's okay, And I wish that I was told sooner that it was okay. And I think that you need to have your support system. And that's a big thing that I talk about here in other
Mm-hmm.
episodes is having your people. And, kind of just goes back to being able to ask for help. It's okay. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know I've mentioned this before, but sometimes it's really hard to look objectively at yourself. So that's where your support group is really great too. Does that make sense? To
Yeah.
have,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
I agree. I mean, I love it because like my biggest fan, I like to say, is my mom.
Oh, that's great.
And yeah, that's my best friend. That's my entire world right there. I don't know what I would do without her. And I it's like everyone needs somebody like my mom in their life because my
Mm-hmm.
mom is the person who, when I am like, oh my God, I don't feel good. Today was terrible. I have so many
Mm-hmm.
problems, this, and that, whenever we get into that anxiety ridden state in our brain and you're just
Mm-hmm.
like, everything is not good. I'm not good, this and that. I just, give her a call and she can hear it in my voice. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like almost like shaking, like would shake me if she could to be like, you don't have problems and we're going to figure this out
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay. So I think
Right.
that we all kind of need that person that really helps us realize our shit, for use of better words, because it's hard to keep yourself accountable and it's hard to stay level headed in, panic attacks or anxiety attacks. It's hard to, even when you're not having those issues, it's hard to kind of stay level headed when you're so used to being anxious or dealing with something with a mental illness that you do need those people that kind of, I like to say, that bring you back to reality almost.
Yeah, yeah. And people who know you, because like my therapist is like that too, but I just can't call her up at 10 o'clock at night, you know? So it's nice to have people
that
that
would
are,
that would cost extra.
yes. And she probably, if it was, she'd probably cut me off. She'd be like, okay, we got to talk about boundaries again. But no,
Right.
but for me, I have one of my best friends who's a life coach to run things past. And then I also have my sponsor. I have a sponsor, my old temporary sponsor, who are great listeners and then give good feedback. They're probably not as loving as your mom because they'll give me the hard feedback too. So,
Oh, she'll be a little rough around the edges, but I know that it's all in good intent and she knows that I can take it.
yeah.
She's a very, very strong woman and she
Uh-huh.
raised a very, very strong daughter and son, so she knows that we could take it like it is.
Okay, that's good. That's good. And
Tough love, mom.
this is good. I have I only have one daughter. I have three boys and a girl. And my relationship with her is fabulous at this point, but there's still a part of me that is hesitant to give tough love, yes, but to pause. I still hesitate, just like I'm doing as I'm speaking right now. I hesitate. But yeah, so I think it's great. Yeah, Katie and I are probably not as quite as close as you and your mom, but we're getting there. So we're doing
That's
good.
good because she
Yeah.
needs it, and I'm sure you need it. So I love hearing stories about parents and kids being close still, because there's too many times where you hear the opposite when kids aren't talking to their parents anymore as adults and this and that. We need our support system, whatever that looks like. You need the people that you can count on. So it's just
Right.
always good to look at those four walls that you've built, that home that started it. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And this is a whole nother conversation. And sometimes if you don't have a great parent, you create your own new family. Because from a therapist point of view, from when I was seeing clients, not everyone is cut out and does a great job as a parent. And so if they're not there for you. You have to learn to detach from, the painful part, the abandoning part of that. But I'll say this too, like my relationship, again, my parents were very patriarchal, very much old school. It's, what I say goes. I was afraid of my parents. That's one reason why I didn't get into too much trouble, is because I thought my mom would kill me or send me off to the convent or something. So it kept me a little bit on the straight and narrow, but I never had that. I don't want to say the word. Well, I never had that intimacy with her, that trust and bond with her.
Sure. Right.
And going back to like families, you do what you know. I mean, honest to God, I was nervous about having a baby girl, and I consciously had to go, all right, your past does not have to impact this relationship with your daughter. Sometimes it still sneaks in. I find myself like words of my mother coming out of my mouth. And don't get me wrong, my mom was a good person. She did a better job than her parents, and she did the best that she could do. She was a good person. It's just that, parenting has changed, thankfully. So
it has, right? Yeah, no, definitely.
yeah.
It's definitely a new game. Or, not really a game, but new rules, right?
That's true. Well, we're better. We're better at it than we used to be, I think. So, I mean, part of that's because
Yeah.
of podcasts like this, where we're comfortable opening up and talking about the hard stuff and normalizing mental health and panic and depression and alcoholism and addiction. Talking about it's huge. So,
Yes, yeah, and like I said, that starts within those four walls that you've built. If you can't do it there, it's hard to feel like you can do it anywhere else. So I need to really work on normalizing those conversations within those walls.
Totally agree with you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your book.
Okay, so as I said earlier, I did a lot of damage to my relationships with my family. The people I hurt the most was myself and my kids and my now ex-husband. And in early recovery, despite having been a social worker and experience and working with families, I continued to do damage. And it took me a while before I could see it. But when I finally saw it and got to the other side of it, I put together, first it started out as workshops and, presentations about parenting and recovery. And then it evolved into a book. I put my personal experience with recovering from addiction and the mistakes I made with some professional background, and threw in a little bit of the science of addiction. And I wrote the book that I wish I had had access to when I was in treatment, because treatment, I would guess, I can't say exactly, 90% of treatment is focusing on the addict, alcoholic, or the mentally ill person, helping them to establish new tools and skills to stay sober. There's not a lot of time and attention put to your family, because there isn't time to do that. And because being sober, in my case, or being on a manageable mental health plane is crucial to being a good parent. So, again, I wrote the book that I wish I had when I entered treatment, and I had started right from the get-go of trying to repair the relationships with my kids. So the book is, the title is constantly evolving because it's being edited. But essentially, it's a guide for people in recovery from addiction, alcoholism, and mental illness on how to repair relationships with your family and friends. I'm real proud of it. I'm excited about it. It's written on a level, easy to read level. It's got some tough love, but it's got a lot of, the goal is to give a lot of hope and to make a
That's
good,
what we need.
yeah. So there's not much literature out there like this, and I'm excited about it being available a year from now.
That's awesome. We're definitely going to have you back on here. And you're going to have to, remember the small people when you become big and famous.
My goal is, sincerely, once I saw the mistakes I was doing, my goal is just to help other people not make the mistakes I did. People who are struggling to repair their relationships. I really have a sincere goal. If the book sells, that's great. But if it helps people, that's more important to me. And if
100%.
Okay, I'm going to stretch this out one thing further. If by somehow it impacts how treatment centers treat families when they come in, or intensive outpatient centers, that would be just the icing on the cake if there were some subtle changes made. Because when I first became a social worker 30 years ago, I worked as a family therapist at inpatient and outpatient drug and alcohol treatment centers. I believe, and I worked at a couple of prominent ones, I have to say, the family programs back then were better than the ones I went through. I went to a great treatment facility, but the family program was a little, my family, I just wish we could have better treatment family programs. Sorry, I got distracted because my battery's running low on my laptop. So anyhow,
yep.
My
You're
ideal
fine.
dream is, yeah, it'll help a lot of people. That's all I want to do. Is help a lot of people. So
yeah,
just like you are,
yeah,
you're helping a lot of people and normalizing panic and anxiety and bringing attention to it.
Yeah, honestly, like you've said, it's not about anything that comes with it. It's just truly about getting through to one person and knowing it helped one person, or whatever that looks like, or helped one person figure it out. Like that's what it's about. And I'm kind of here for the same thing. Like, I wish I had somebody that told me what I tell people when I was dealing with this for 7+ years. I just wish that somebody took the time to talk about it like I talk about it, and so many other podcasters in this community talk about it, and how we try to normalize it, like we've said. And it's just, that's the driving force. We want to better the youth. We want to almost like go back, and what would you tell your younger self, and like how would you navigate what you're navigating now? Because I always wish that I knew more before than I knew now.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you there. And I wish I would have asked for help sooner, so I wouldn't have taken my family down the toilet with me.
It's part of the journey, right? It's part of what helps us grow and continue to grow. And like you said, you've raised strong kids from it, and you're incredibly strong yourself. So, it all worked out. It's all happening for a reason.
That is true. I'm becoming a strong person, by the way. There's always room to grow. So, that with humility. So, yeah.
And kind of like my wrapping this up question is, like, what changes have you made then to stay on your path?
Well, I think the biggest change is to, not get complacent, to continue to do the work, to follow the basic self-help principles that keep me sober and keep me sane, which is getting enough sleep, eating okay, finding balance in my life, making sure I'm doing something social and spiritual. Just maintaining my program. So that's, and for me, probably the biggest change that I've made, and it's a simple thing, but it's been, two things. One, learning to ask for help, which also means saying, I don't know how to do this, like with my new laptop. And the other is learning to say no. And it's okay sometimes to set boundaries and say, no, I can't do that. I'm sorry. So those two little things have made a big difference for me. What is your favorite thing to do for yourself?
I think that I like to say that I don't think I have a path yet. I think that I'm still trying to find what's going to make me happier. And what's going to keep me level-headed when it's whatever that ends up looking like, it's going to be what it's going to be. I want to start to meditate,
Mm-hmm.
but I haven't gotten around to it, and I know that I should. And,
Mm-hmm.
I want to start to do yoga. Also, haven't gotten around to it, but I know that I should. But honestly, this might be silly, but something small, I guess, if we want to say kind of what I've done so far, is I just like to remind myself that each day is a new beginning and that each day is going to be a good day, no matter what that looks like. I don't like to say that I've had a bad day anymore because I don't like to let anxiety win. I don't like to let panic disorder win. I like to, just say that it's going to be a good day.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
whatever that looks like, that's what it looks like.
Right. Stay in the moment, stay in the present. I
Yeah.
like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's talked about it before. We need to be present, we need to be grounded, and we'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do. We push through. We continue to figure it out and adapt to all of these different things that life throws at us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, where can my viewers connect with you, Janice?
Thank you for asking. Well, I am on Instagram. My handle, if that's the right word, is parenting underscore the word IN underscore recovery. And then I have a website that I'm in the process of expanding right now, and we'll have information about what the book when it's available. That is www.janicejohnsondowd.com. And yeah, I would love it if you would check those out and share this podcast. Any of your listeners, share it with all your friends because, that's the best
I
way to
also
help
did
each
not
other.
pay her to say that.
So, no, but it's true. It's very true. I text out the links to all my friends. I'm like, okay, this is a good one. This one's different from the last. But just sharing with friends, because that's how you grow more so on. And I'm really stealing that from one of my favorite podcasts. I like crime podcasts as well. And they always say their
Oh, you're one
best,
of those.
I am, the best form of advertisement is to tell someone else about this podcast. So panic button.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janice. It was a pleasure speaking with you. You bring so much value to this community and so much knowledge on mental health and your road to recovery. It's just so needed. And we just really, really appreciate everything that you continue to do and totally excited for your book. That's going to be amazing. Again, we're going to have you come back.
Thank you.
And as we always wrap these things up, we're not going to push that panic button. We're going to figure it out. Thanks so much, Janice.
Thanks. Have a great day.